Welcome to Pop Culture Retro, which was recently voted the 15th best podcast by the residents of the Golden Years Retirement Community in Boca Raton, Florida. Each show, we'll revisit some of your favorite pop culture memories with insider and outsider perspectives. Now, please help me welcome your hosts, Ike Eisenmann and Jonathan Rosen.
Hello, and welcome to another edition of Pop Culture Retro. Today, we are thrilled to welcome the host of the popular OSI podcast, which is dedicated to all things $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman. Please help us welcome John Drew, Jerry Lange, and Elizabeth Goddard. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, guys.
How you guys doing? Hey, how you guys doing?
Well, today, to start with, this is our first time with three guests, so we're going to try to sort everything out.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, to
Jerry?
dive right in, we're Jonathan and I are both huge fans of both shows, and I have to admit right up front, I can't not count how many times my brother and I would run in slow motion and jump up and off of things and try to be the $6 Million Man. It was a great, both of them great shows. Now you have two different podcasts on this, one devoted to each series, and you do an episode by episode review. John and Jerry do the $6 Million Man, and John and Elizabeth cover the Bionic Woman. Now, John, you were the one who started them both. When did that first come about, and what was it about those series that really appealed to you?
Well, I've been podcasting since about 2008. I've been doing various pop culture style podcasts and such, and I always wanted to do one on $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman. Is probably one of my all-time favorite shows. And I actually did one prior to this with another gentleman, and it all started out very well. We were producing content every 2 weeks. It was him and I with guests reviewing the episodes, totally audio, and it was called Cyborgs, the Bionic Podcast. But over time, he became a bit more disillusioned. I think he got a little tired, and it just wasn't the same trying to do it without him. He actually tried to do it without me, and I think he got one episode in and he gave up. In the meantime, I still had a story to tell because we'd only gotten halfway through the series, and I was like, I want to do this. So I devised the OSI Files, and I wanted it to be so different that nobody could say, oh, he's just copying what he just did before in terms of content and what have you. The problem was that it was kind of boring to do. We did a few episodes audio wise, and I do one a month, then one every couple of months. I think I got altogether 4 in, and I said, if I'm going to do this, I still have to have it different, but it needs to be what I really wanted to cover, even in Cyborgs, I've got to admit. So that's when I came onto the idea with Facebook and doing video. We use a thing called StreamYard. And when I started out, it was 6 mil. And Jerry had appeared as a guest host a couple of times. And then he'd also help pitch in whenever someone didn't show up. He'd just say, oh, yeah, I'm free Friday night. Let's do it. And next thing you know, we're doing $6 Million Man. We get to the Bionic Woman episodes. Jerry's like, hey, that's too much, because what we tried to do is we tried to do it in real time. So basically, it was like each episode of $6 Million Man, first season, then we took the summer off, then we came back in September, second season, $6 Million Man. So he was like, too much. I can't do both shows then, because now I'm going to be doing this twice a week. So Jerry suggested Liz, because she'd been on a couple of the $6 Million Man segments. And, the rest, as they say, is history.
And Liz, same question for you a little bit. Besides how you became involved, what is it about the series that appeals to you?
How I got involved is that I found Cyborgs that John had done, and I loved it, and it was so great. And then they stopped doing it, and I reached out and I said, when are you going to start again? Because they were just starting into season 3 of 6 Mil and season 1 of Bionic Woman, and I was particularly interested in Bionic Woman because I saw that as a kid, and that's how I sort of found these guys and then ended up over here. I watched Bionic Woman and $6 Million Man as a kid because I had 2 brothers and 2 sisters, and we watched, whoever controlled the, dial at that time that night. The boys seemed to get there first, and so saw $6 Million Man and liked it. And then, of course, we saw the Bionic Woman being introduced into one of the episodes and went, hey, this is getting really good now. And I really resonated with that because it was a female that was sort of equal to the $6 Million Man, and I really meant something to me as a young person at the time. And so then when, Lindsay got her own show, it was like, oh yeah, I'm definitely going to watch that. So I loved the show as a kid, watched it to the very end, and then, just didn't see it again on TV until the DVDs came out. And I didn't get the DVDs until 2015 when I was at home recovering from hip surgery. And someone gave me some CDs or DVDs of Bionic Woman and said, here, I remember you liked it. This is how past the time during recovery. And it's like, oh my gosh, I forgot how much I liked the show. And then, searched online and, found all this sort of, fandom and groups, and that's sort of how it all became a reality.
Oh, fantastic.
Okay. So now, Jerry, how did you get involved in the podcast, and what is it about the show that appealed to you?
Oh, sorry. Oh, there I am. Sorry about that.
He was gone.
Wrong one. I was kind of, well, for me, if you ask John, I was kind of like the fill-in guest that wouldn't go away. Is how it happened with John. But
okay.
But my fandom, obviously, like them, I was old enough where I grew up and seen the show in the original run and was always a fan of it. And the one episode that always stuck out to me was the Secret of Bigfoot episode. The one where he fights Andre the Giant in a costume. It was like the most awesome thing I'd ever seen as a kid. And I loved the show. And then the show faded out, like everybody's Star Wars comes along and other things, and the show's still in my mind, but I forget about it. I don't really follow through other than on YouTube and see the things. Then Time Life released the box set for the first time, all the DVD box set of the whole series, which was the first time, other than you could get it on VHS and that. And then I picked it up and I started watching it. And then by day, I'm a government employee. By night, I'm an illustrator and an artist in that. And I started searching YouTube for shows about, just $6 Million Man. And up came John's Cyborgs. And then I seen a link for Facebook. And I started watching that and following that and commenting a lot in the comments section. And then next thing I know, the Cyborgs wasn't there going. And then John had reached out to me and said, I'm thinking about starting up another show. Would you like to be a guest, to continue what I'd done with Cyborgs? I said, sure. So then I came on, I believe, was I on the first episode, John? I think
you were on the first.
Yeah, it was the first. And then it went well, I believe, and stuff, and offered some ideas on production. Then next thing John reaches out again. Hey, can you come on again, buddy? One of my guests canceled. And then it happened a few times, and then he said, why don't you just come be my partner like Paul was on the other one, and we'll just go through the whole series, and we'll have different guests on, which we have from around the world, different guests, and even John spoke with some of the people involved with the show. And that's how I got involved with it. And
it sounds like a drug deal. Like they'll give you a little bit at a time, and then
yeah, kind of like the guest that wouldn't leave. Party.
I think this is probably mostly for John. But how long after you started doing the podcast did you notice that you started building a following to it?
With Cyborgs, I'll be honest with you, I didn't pay as much attention. With OSI Files, it was rather quick because there were a lot of people who remembered Cyborgs, and it was like, oh, you're doing this and you're going to be consistent. And that's the biggest thing when it comes to podcasting is the consistency. When you start to fade out, I've got a few other podcasts I've kind of let slide for a couple of months now, and I need to get back into them. It's really the consistency. Even OSI Files, we've been on a little bit of a break, and people are asking, when is it coming back? When is it coming back? Our Facebook page has over 3,000, people following us and such. So, in fact, we're planning to get back into it for January for 2024. So.
And once you stop doing regular content, you start losing the audience. It's tough.
You start losing the audience,
yeah, for sure. Well, now that Jerry's real quick before I got to interject here publicly, I got to point out the poster in the room when we're on Jerry, because especially for those who are only listening to this, they won't be able to see it, but he has the movie poster of the best Disney movie ever made, and I certainly appreciate that so much. Escape Witch Mountain for those who can't see it, but
oh my gosh.
So jumping back to your show, did anyone from the original series notice that you were doing it, and what was their reaction if so?
In terms of noticing, no, but we went and got their notice. We got their attention when we were when I was doing Cyborgs. We had a number of people from the show come on and do interviews. Robbie Rist came on. Jim McMullen came on. Some of the writers came on. And at one point, I managed to get to meet Lee Majors and Lindsay Wagner at a convention, and they did, they were doing panels, and I got to be the host of the panels because I knew the guys who were running the convention. So they got me in there. So I had my little recorder set up and everything. So I recorded that. So we were able to release those as episodes, and we got them doing intros and such. In terms of OSI Files, Kenny Johnson, who created the Bionic Woman, has been on the show. Jane Morrow has been on the show because she appeared in several $6 Million Man episodes and such. And Lindsay actually did a Christmas greeting for us a couple of years ago.
Oh, nice.
So, yeah. So they're aware of the show, how much involvement, because, both of them, they sort of control the flow of how much they're involved in the Bionic world and such. I mean, they're very, it's like we do other things. We love talking about it, but we're not, we appreciate the fans, but we're not as deep into it that we're checking in with you guys, so to speak.
Well, I want to start, and anyone can answer this one, I guess, but let's start with the $6 Million Man. It was based on the book Cyborg. So first of all, I want to know, have any of you read that before?
Yes. Yeah.
You have, right?
Oh,
So
yeah.
what are some of the similarities between the book and the finished product in the TV series?
Characterization, for one thing. One of the things that's so appealing about $6 Million Man, the TV show, is that Lee Majors is your good guy. I mean, he is, as Harv Bennett, the producer of the show, said, he's Gary Cooper. He walks in, he's a man of few words, and he saves the day. And he does always the right thing. He may be conflicted at times. He may have issues. He may have his dark moments, but he always comes out on top, and he's always, the winner, and he's always the good guy. The Steve Austin in the book is a bit more rugged. He's a bit more manly. It's interesting because Martin Caidin, who wrote the book, didn't want Lee Majors as Steve Austin. He thought he was too handsome, too pretty boyish. He wanted actually Monty Markham, who wound up being the $7 million Man in a couple of episodes. He thought he would have pulled off more of the swagger that Steve portrays in the novels. So the biggest thing with Cyborg and the movie, because there was a movie version done of it, is more so the characterization. Also, some of the internal workings of the organization that Steve works for is different in the book and in the movie. In the movie, we don't even have Oscar Goldman in the first movie.
The original, yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing I noticed, the big difference between the book and the series, and I think it's because of who the series might have been targeted towards, is that there was a lot more scientific information that was provided on, how bionics worked, how it came about, a lot more detail on, just the science behind it, which you didn't really get in the series. We just saw the bionics taking place. We saw that, an operation, that was it. There wasn't a lot of detail in it. We never really saw a lot of scientific exposure of bionics during the series. There's a little bit more on the $6 Million Man side than there was on the Bionic Woman side. Sometimes they, do some enhancements to Steve's bionics, but you really didn't see that much on the Bionic Woman. So they didn't spend much time just on the science of it, which I kind of missed in the series, which I liked in the book. But there was much more of a human element to the series than there was in the book. You really got to know the characters, of course, because it was longer than a novel. And you really like both of them. I found the book was ended up being a little bit more I would say mission heavy. To have the book was sort of dedicated towards the missions that Steve was on. A lot of detail about that, which kind of bored me. I was looking, I want to see that visually more. But that's just sort of my impression of it. But there was good parts and bad parts about it, but it was kind of different than the series ended up being, I think.
Well, were there any other actors considered besides Lee Majors before he came on?
Not that I can think
I've
of.
heard of
Oh,
either.
really?
No.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he was doing Owen Marshall at the time, and he was a rising star for ABC. So they wanted some sort of vehicle to move him on
Yeah.
into his own show. And then along comes this, and it was supposed to just be a series of movies. It's supposed to be a monthly movie series, because they were doing that. A lot of the networks had their mystery movie series and what have you. But after 3 movies, the show was so popular, they were like, we got to go weekly. And they gave Harv Bennett the series because it was Glenn Larson who handled 2 of the movies. I forget who the producer was. I know Russ Mayberry was directing, but and who was producing it. Glenn Larson did 2, and he made him like a James Bond type. And then Harv Bennett gets it, and he's told by ABC, "You got 6 weeks to put this thing together." And he retools it to where, because his vision, Steve Austin, based on the pilot, based on the book, but toned down. He's Gary Cooper.
Well,
Did not like the original Steve Austin in the first 3 episodes, the
No.
pilot movies.
No.
No,
He's a
no.
womanizer. He makes
Yep.
a lot of sexual innuendos. Yeah.
Yeah. Did not like that character. I'm glad he morphed into what he was, ended up being. But yeah, I don't know if the series would have done as well if they had left him, the way he was in the first 3 movies. Don't know if that would have been appealing to the audience.
Well, it premiered in 73. So you touched on some of them. Like, do you have like other behind the scenes stories that went into the production to help it get off the ground?
In terms of getting off the ground, it was really just a matter of the writers, bringing in the writers. And at that time, they actually brought in some science fiction writers who had credits either on screen or in books. DC Fontana, who wrote for Star Trek, she had done a couple of episodes. She did one for the first season. She did the Rescue of Athena 1. There was who else? Harold Livingston, who wrote Day of the Robot. He also went on to write Star Trek: The Motion Picture. I bring up Star Trek a lot because I've always said that $6 Million Man and Bionic Woman are bridge shows between Star Trek, the original series, and Star Trek, The Next Generation. Because if you look at it, that first season alone, there's George Takei, there's William Shatner appearing. And then you get towards the end, and you get Fred Freiberger now producing the show because Harv Bennett left in the last season, and Fred Freiberger had produced the last season of Star Trek. You got John Delancey, who'll go on to play Q, appearing in 5 episodes of $6 Million Man. So I always say the 2 shows were like bridge episodes. You look at an episode, you will find a Star Trek alum, writer, director, producer, actor, actress. They're all there.
Exactly. You basically have like Harv Bennett, who had to take the original. Harv Bennett had to take the 3 original pilot movies and change them to make the TV show, to make it more action, more basically based for TV, because the character was more very James Bond like in the 3 movies, very suave, and he wasn't like, which became the everyday man. His character became, an astronaut, which people could relate to in the 70s, which was big. Then you had Harv Bennett, I believe, do the same thing for the second Star Trek movie. The first one, people didn't like the whole high-tech sciencey aspect of it. They wanted more action and adventure. So then I believe Harv Bennett came in for this, was what really got the second Star Trek movie going, more action oriented, very action character driven.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I guess you've already answered this question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. You've got Steve Austin's character develops in a different way as the series came together, and the action-oriented stuff. Were there any other noticeable changes that happened as the series went on?
As the series goes on, because when you get that first season and a good part of the second season, it's still, granted, it's about a cyborg. There's fantastical elements to it in such, he can leap in the air, he can run 60 miles an hour, but it was always grounded in some sort of science. As we start getting into the 3rd, 4th, 5th season, now it's becoming more like the children's superhero show. Now we're starting to, that's when Bigfoot's brought along. That's when they introduced the sound effects more so. Because that first season, the bionic sound effect is barely used at all, except for like maybe the last 2 episodes. And even then, it's sparingly used. Not every little feat he does gets a sound effect. By the time we get to the 5th season, he's rowing a boat and they're just constantly churning out that sound effect or something like that. They're doing things like even using Tweety Bird sounds in the later seasons.
Yeah.
So the production moves more towards for the kids in 3rd, 4th, and 5th. Not to say that there weren't some really good episodes, but you can definitely tell between 1st and 2nd, and then just the morphing.
Steve Austin was a lot colder in the 1st season than later on.
Oh yeah, he was still
John,
representing the Bionics.
Didn't we sort of say that when Harv Bennett left, the show kind of shifted a bit? And that's when we started to see. So I think the departure of Harv Bennett is when we saw kind of a shift in the series and I think the quality of the storylines and some of that,
Right, that's when Fred Freiberger comes in. ABC starts, having more control. They actually start dictating more to the production team. This is what we want. That's where we start seeing more also of like the homages to, like they do their Jaws episode. They do their disaster episode, like with called Killer Wind. And again, still some gems though amongst them all. And of course they trot out Bigfoot because every time they need a ratings boost, it's like, let's do a Bigfoot. And they admitted it. They were like, we should have stopped at 1. That was it. The secret of Bigfoot. We told what it was. He's an alien and we're done. But so wildly popular, we got to keep going with it. And we love the ratings boosts.
Yeah, they went from very strong, almost like sci-fi character building episodes of season 1, season 2, especially when they brought in the Bionic Woman. So by the 5th season, you had Steve pushing a sub on the bottom of the ocean floor, which physically wouldn't be possible. Literally from just turning over a tree. By the 5th season, he's pushing a sub on the ocean floor.
Because we had a couple of people from Space 1990 talking episodes of Space 1999, and Fred Freiberger was not spoken of fondly. He
Space 1999, $6 Million Man, Star Trek. He had the handle on all those last seasons, and it's very easy to. And over the years, I've not that I'm saying he didn't have his faults, but it's very easy to say, he's kind of like the Ted McGinley of producers. You bring him in, we're done.
Yeah,
but the thing is, he went in there, put in place by powers that be that had certain mandates, and he did the best he could with them. That's the whole thing. He did the best he could. I don't think it's entirely fair to do any more than you can actually say for Ted McGinley either. It's just, dude, you're in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Well, I was reading, doing research before you all came on, that Lee Majors kind of changed as well as the series went on. You've heard that or read that too?
Oh yes. Oh yeah. He was a lot more outgoing with the crew and such. By the time we get to the 3rd season, and now, Farrah and he are married, and she's starting to have her star rise with Charlie's Angels. He becomes a lot more reclusive. He doesn't do as many interviews with the press. He doesn't joke around with the crew. Like I said, we've had some people on, especially with the cyborgs, and it's like night and day. They'll tell you, like, he was so outgoing. Jane Morrow, 1st season, she was there, and then she shows up in the 4th season. She's like totally different man. Still pleasant to me, still very polite, but not as outgoing and as involved with the crew. He just came, he did his job, and he left.
Yeah, I think he was I believe the end of the 3rd season he was going to quit. The show contract was up, and Gil Gerard from Buck Rogers was one of the people that were going to replace him.
4th season, yeah.
4th season. They're going to replace him with Gil Gerard.
Yeah,
Buck Rogers fame.
Buck Rogers, yeah.
Wow.
Well, that's apparently the story of how he got Buck Rogers. That was the consolation prize, apparently. I don't know about that.
I watched it.
I watch. But you know what? And saying all that too, when it comes to 4th, 5th season, and we watched it. I mean, and not just here as OSI Files. I watched it religiously, faithfully. I was there every week. Jerry was talking about, how like when the show was over, then we move on to other things with Star Wars. I'm the guy that never gave up on it. Whenever it would pop up on syndicated television here in New York, Channel 5, I was watching it. I was videotaping it at 2 in the morning, The Bionic Woman, on Saturday nights when they, for a brief time there, when they had, and it was like, I already have some of these on tape, but I wanted to see, what they edited out, what the quality was. Was it any better? Sci-Fi gets it. I was there for the ride. And then, the DVDs come out. Cozy, for over 10 years, Cozy TV was running both Six
Wow.
and
10
Bionic
years.
Woman. Yeah.
Yeah.
I never, I guess, gave up on it. I mean, yeah, I found
We're
other things
playing
of interest. But
Bionic Woman at 4 a.m. in the morning here, and I would
Mm.
get up and watch it because that was before we had, VCRs. So you
Mhm.
had to watch it. It's like, okay, I'll set my alarm, get up and watch it at 4.
Oh my
Feel like time was
gosh.
on.
All right, that's serious dedication. Well, what about the story that Lee Majors was not happy with the attention that the new series got?
The Bionic Woman?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, between the deal that Lindsay's agent worked out, and the story goes that she didn't even really want to do the series. She didn't even want to come back for the return appearance because they killed
Yeah.
her character off at the end of The Bionic Woman.
Mm.
And she was like, give him the most ridiculous terms. And he did. And they went, okay. They wanted her because there was talk of Sally Field, even Farrah, Stephanie Powers, possibly
Powers, I remember that. Yeah.
replacing
Mhm.
her. And they were like, no, we want Lindsay Wagner. She's the Bionic Woman. She's Jamie
Wow.
Summers. She epitomizes it. So they gave in to all her demands. And, the show comes along. And of course, Lee's like, wait a minute, she's making as much, if not more. She's got a licensing deal with the merchandising, which he didn't have. And that's always been a sore point with Lee. Even to this day, he gets a little, ticked off at seeing merchandising that goes on. That's like, wait a minute, where's my cut? So
Yeah, the amazing thing is too, is when they had the first 2-part Bionic Woman episode, that she died again. Kenny Johnson killed her. He was the scriptwriter, created the character. And then there was a huge backlash. As a kid, I remember seeing it and crying as a kid. Oh my God, she died. It was so, and there was people writing letters to, and kids and college professors and stuff were writing in, how could you kill this authentic female character that everybody cared about? And the producers go back because of the ratings, said, Kenny, why'd you kill her? Well, you guys told me she's dead. We want her back.
Told you.
Well, the thing is,
Not
her
to do it.
contract was done because she was part of the old universal contract system.
Yeah.
So her commitment was done. And they said, well, get her again. So then, of course, they got her for the return to Bionic Woman. And that was it for that. And she was done. Then they had to go back and get her again and say, get her back.
Must be nice to be in demand.
The wisdom of network executives.
Yeah.
So what was the relationship like between Lee and Lindsay, though?
that was pretty frosty from what I understand during
Yeah.
those. You wouldn't know it looking at them on screen. You would never
Right.
know it. They
No.
were amazing,
Mm.
the two of them.
Mm.
But off screen, they had their issues. And it's funny, even to this day, I mean, they get along fine now to a certain extent, but at the same time, there are things I think, because like I said, I saw them at this convention and I got to host both their panels. I did
That's really cool.
Lindsay, I did Lindsay's on Friday, Lee's was on Saturday, and Lindsay's and Lee's together was on Sunday. And Lee's still the same. He's very, quiet, and he doesn't really engage much unless he's having a really good time. If he's having a really good time, then suddenly he's all smiles and slapping backs and talking to everybody. And at one point they were finishing up their thing. The two of them walked back behind the stage. Now, both days I walked off the stage. I was like, you know what? I'm going to take a chance. I'm going to go backstage and follow them this time and see what's what. Because I know that the guys who are running the con are back there. So at worst, they'll just be like, whoa, get out, But no, there's Lee back there and he's chatting it up because he had a great time with the audience. And
Right.
Lindsay's the whole time going, Lee, we got to get back to the tables. We got to, because they're doing autographing photos and what have you.
Yeah.
And Lee's like, you go. I'll catch you up. So and she's just looking frustrated because it's like, yeah, they want to see Lindsay, but they also want to see Lee. They don't want to double dip. And, because this was Dragon Con and they have a huge, signing section and stuff like that for all the celebrities. But Lee's there. and he's just having a great time. And he looks over at me and he's like, "Hey kid, come here." So I'm like, now you say kid, I'm like maybe at this point 30 years
40s?
younger. I'm in my
Yeah.
40s. I'm in my
Yeah.
40s. He's like, "Kid, come here."
I
So
think
I
around
come over,
75 at the time.
right,
Yeah.
right. So I come over to him and he's like, "We got to get a picture." Like, this is a guy who's selling his autograph and picture
Wow.
for like $100 at the table,
Yeah.
but he's like, "We got to get a picture." Okay. So I give my phone to one of the convention organizers. He takes a picture and Lee looks at me and goes, "You're not smiling, kid. What's wrong?" I'm petrified because I'm standing right now next to Lee Majors getting my picture taken. So Lee reaches over and he starts going coochie coochie coo, and he starts
Wait,
tickling me.
did he really?
He
Yeah.
tickled me. I start cracking up, and they get another picture, and the picture is of me with, doing a belly laugh almost because, he just got me so good, and he's smiling like it. I still treasure that picture to this day. But
Oh, that's amazing.
Oh man,
Yeah.
that's
It's a tickle picture.
that's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Hmm.
Yeah, he
Well,
was. I'm sorry. Good.
No. I was just gonna jumping back into Bionic Woman. The Jamie Summers character was supposed to just be a one-off, right? They had not originally had plans to make
Yes.
into a series.
Not at all. Not at
Yeah.
all. They didn't even have plans. The whole idea was because they were getting to the end of the second season, and Kenny Johnson tells the story. They didn't have any other ideas for stories. They were actually starting to run out of ideas in the writer's room, and they bring in Kenny Johnson. He's fresh from doing some stuff over with I think it was Night Gallery and such. And they were like, "What do you got?" And he goes, "Well, what about Mrs. Steve Austin? What about the love of his life that never, and that was actually the original title. It was a one-part story called Mrs. Steve Austin. And Jamie was a psychic. And she has the accident, she becomes bionic, and then she dies at the end of it. And then over time it was like, no, if we're going to do this, make it bigger. So one part became two, and Mrs. Steve Austin became the Bionic Woman, and they took out the psychic element and everything. I've got a feeling more of that was Kenny than anything, thinking, all right, this is ridiculous. But yeah, it was supposed to be one and done. This is an aspect of Steve's life, and we move on. And actually, they did move on. There were 2 episodes afterwards. Steve's flirting with an Irish stewardess. The next
yeah, wasn't there another love of his life in a couple of episodes after the married woman?
That was a couple of episodes before Lost Love.
Before.
Yeah,
Lost Love.
But that was different, though. That was different.
Yeah, it's what we call the not Jamie. When we're on our show every week, we say, okay, who's the not Jamie this week? And then for Jamie's characters, who's the not Steve?
Yeah.
Right.
For New Love. Yeah.
Well, the wife didn't necessarily have to be the love of his life. I mean, so you mentioned Sally Field, which I can't see. Stephanie Powers I can actually see. So, and I always love hearing this. Do you know who else was considered maybe for that role?
Well, there was Farrah. Farrah was actually put out
but
there.
I had read that Lee pushed Farrah more than them considering.
Lee was pushing Farrah for it, exactly.
Yeah, she had been on a few episodes already of the season 1 and season 2. Some really great episodes. As one of them was 2 different characters, and she was really good in it. But yeah, it was just Lee trying to push. Her career was in infancy at the time. She had been, I think, on the Partridge Family, and a cameo of that, and a small part and throughout. But he was trying to push her in that direction. But yeah, we all agree that Lindsay really, I mean, the writing was great. The character that Kenny created, and the writing was so great on that episode. But Lindsay's performance was just such a breath of fresh air. It was so outstanding. We almost can't picture anybody else doing a role.
No, I can't. Yeah. No.
Oh no, I mean that always fascinates even me. And I grew up in the business. When you hear about other people who was the second choice or was first considered, and then you think, I couldn't possibly picture them in that part. So
the only reason they even considered other people was because Lindsay didn't want to do it. So they were looking for somebody to replace her. So it wasn't like she was up against a couple of other actresses. It was her. And if she refused to do it, who else could step into that role? So it was always just her. And if she said no, okay, what about Sally Field, Farrah, or Stephanie Powers? That's what I understand what transpired.
Hey, Ike, I have a question for you because you were acting back then. Did you ever meet any of them back then, like Lee or Lindsay, when you were in the
No,
business
believe
back
me,
then?
I wanted to be on those shows as badly as anything else that I got to work on, and there was just never a role that came up that suited my age, and it would have been an absolute blast. Just it would have been a blast. But no, I never ran into them. I never met any of them. I was just a happy fan of the show at home.
The only one I could see you being in is Danny's Inferno, where he meets a young kid who makes the rocket fuel in season 4. I think
Hmm.
season 4, and a teenager invents this rocket fuel, and then
Uh,
there are people after them to get it because it's an explosive, like a bomb almost that blows up.
well, I may not have seen that episode because I probably would have been mad if I had
Yeah.
to do it. But can you tell us some behind the scenes things that went on for the start of Bionic Woman, the series?
Bionic Woman was another interesting one too, because they kind of gave it the same sort of dictate as $6 Million Man. It was one of those things after Return of the Bionic Woman, and they saw the ratings were really killer and she was alive and everything was good. They were like, go to series. So you had Return of Bionic Woman September. Bionic Woman itself proper was January of
Very.
76, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
January of
Yep.
76. Um, and they were really pushing it hard to the point where Lindsay exhausted herself, and again, with her caliber of star power, she was able to, because they were doing 6-day shoots, she got them to turn it around into a 7-day shoot, because she was like, I can't do these longer days. You gotta give me some breather, especially since I'm starring in it. And they actually reworked the scheduling, and then apparently other television shows picked up on that and started
Mm.
doing it more often,
Yeah.
what I understand.
No.
She also
Yeah.
had a stunt woman and a body double to help her through the production because she couldn't be in all places all the time. So when she was doing something else, they'd have a body double walking, away from the screen, or a hand or something like that, just so that there was some break for her to do one thing while they were filming, something else. So Steve just had a stunt double where she had a stunt double and a body double for that series.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Lee didn't use the stunt double all the time either, much to the chagrin of the
Yeah.
producer.
I could see that.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, she was less athletic. She didn't do much of the jumps or anything, or barely any of the running.
No.
You could tell when her
Yeah.
stunt double was running, just like the same for
Yeah.
Lee had Vince
Oh, that's
Dedrick
funny.
Senior,
Yeah.
and you could tell when Vince was for Steve was filling in, especially in the earlier episodes. But Lee was, he was athletic. He was actually a football player and stuff, and
Yeah. Oh,
taught at
very athletic.
so
Yeah.
he wanted to do like he did, I believe, what, John, like 75% of all his stunts,
He
and
did about 75% of all his own stunts. Yeah.
Mm.
I would say though, Vince never made any attempt to try and match Lee's stride, but Rita, right?
Rita. Yeah.
Rita Lindsay's stunt double, she did. In fact, she even said, she goes, you got a lopey kind of run there, Lindsay. But she learned it. So this
She
way,
did a good. Yeah, she did a really good job in mimicking her style
yeah.
for
yeah.
sure.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about the jumps is they would basically have the stunt person, like an example, when they were do the bionic jump onto a building or over something, they'd have the stunt double go up on the top of the building and they'd jump backwards and push their hands out to make it look like they were coming up to grab something. They would jump back with their hands coming to them, and they'd go down, and then they'd reverse the film when they inserted it into when they were editing process. So they actually jumped down instead of they obviously no wire didn't pull them up. It wasn't a wire or anything pulling them up. It was
That's
stunt
great.
that way it was done.
Yeah.
Now, I'm curious. One of the things I'm curious about always, and I love hearing these shows, and I love the fans that keep track of this stuff. Now, any changes or inconsistent narratives like that happened over the course of either series? Like, I know, like there are fans like in Star Trek. Well, in season 1 you did this, but then in season 4 you said you couldn't do that. So, like, so what? Anything like inconsistency with the series?
Go ahead, Liz.
I would say, for me, not so much in the terms of what their physical abilities were. I just know that there was a big change in season 3 for Bionic Woman when it moved to NBC from ABC, and there were no more crossover episodes with Steve and Jamie. And then Jamie's character, who was always kind of, trying to, reconnect with Steve over the first 2 seasons ended because, they're now working on 2 different networks and there's no guest appearances. They had Jamie sort of, fall in love every week with a different guy. So
Yeah.
that was, and they took the schoolroom out of the series and they just decided to have her doing mission, mission, mission every single week rather than sort of splitting her time between being a school teacher part-time and an agent part-time, which is what the series was based on. And it went to just no more school. It was all mission based, falling in love with every episode with a different guy she met. So it kind of changed the sort of the feeling of the series at that point. It was kind of going off in a different direction. There was a lot of sort of outer spacey things that were going on as well, aliens, and it started going in kind of a different direction at that point. That was 1977, 78, and then Star Wars was really big then. So I think they were kind of sort of latching onto that theme. So I felt that the third season was so much different than the first 2 seasons for Bionic Woman because of that.
Yeah, yeah, we all felt as kids when they started it. They were, she was, with Steve, and then she basically what happened is because of her accident and the surgery to bring her back, she lost her memory of Steve, and she couldn't remember. They were engaged to be married and everything like that in the original first two-parter. And then when she's brought back to life because of the process, she loses most of her memory of Steve. So as kids, we're all like, "Oh, is she ever going to remember him?" Or is he remembers the love he had for her, but she couldn't. She even says, "I can't remember what it's like to love you." And as kids, it tore us apart. So you're always bringing him onto her show in the beginning to kind of as kids to reconnect them together and to keep and to bring the watchers of the $6 Million Man over to Bionic Woman. And like Liz, I think it was great. They started off having it as a school teacher on an army base is how they find her work. And as kids, we connected that because we were kids. So we're kind of cool. She's a teacher. And and you got the different scenes and things going on with the kids, which are great. You got a young Robbie Rist in it and a couple other young kids that went on to be actors. And I believe the one kid was in the second Witch Mountain film, I believe. As one of the gang kids, I believe. He was one of her classroom kids too. And
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember the actor's name. He was part of the gang. I don't remember the actor's name.
Might have been Brad Savage, unless. Well, you know what? I don't.
No, I think it was the other guy though.
It could have been Poindexter also because I worked a lot.
Yeah, he was. I think he was the kid with the brown hair and the taller of them, I believe, of the gang.
And Lindsay's younger sister was also in the classroom in season 2. A couple times she was just one of the background kids that were there. She brought her onto the set and had her, be a student. But yeah, that all went away.
Yeah, I loved it, like the humor and like the first episode where the kids are testing a new teacher out because they were called the rough gang that nobody wanted to teach on the base. They were just kids of parents who were military and were gone all the time. So they kind of had attitudes to kids. And she shows up and they're putting her through the ringer. And basically she's like, after they keep testing her, she finally sits down with a phone book in her hand and she says, I believe kids with cooperation. She starts to rip the phone book. You see all the look on the kid's faces. She rips the phone book in front of them. And then they start to behave from then on. And she connects with them and tells them how much she cares for them. And it's going to be different with her. She wants them to learn. So it was really well done. And then they dropped it totally out of the story.
That was a big phone book for Ventura County. I'm thinking it was all of California. It was like this big. No way, that's Ventura. No way.
Well, while doing the podcast, what were some things you learned about the series that would surprise viewers?
That's an interesting question.
Good one. That's a good one.
Well, think about that for a second, guys, because I want to go back just for a moment because you mentioned the narrative and you said, what have the narratives changed? And Liz points out the third season of Bionic Woman, fifth season of $6 Million Man 2. One of the things, the reason why the show holds up is that for the most part, the narrative for the first 4 seasons of 6 Mil and the first 2 seasons of Bionic Woman is consistent. Harv Bennett is at the helm of both shows. Kenny Johnson is at the helm also of Bionic Woman. He's an executive producer on the show. Both men leave the shows in 5th and 3rd seasons of their respective shows. And that's when things go out the window. Fred Freiberger is more concerned with just producing and getting it out there. And you see the same inconsistencies a lot of time on Star Trek, and I'm sure with Space 1999, it's been a while. Bionic Woman went through a series of rotating producers. It did not have a consistent producer throughout its entire run. So then you see things like Jamie suddenly being a lot more like just into lots of men, which was unlike her because she seemed to be more settled with Steve. And in $6 Million Man's case, there's a episode early on where he's asked, what family do you have? And he goes, my parents are dead. And we're like,
Oh,
Yeah.
whoa,
I forgot
wait a
about that.
minute.
We
Stepdad
just saw
was in an
Bionic
episode of
Woman.
the yeah.
We saw him.
It's on the Bionic Woman, your stepdad. What are you doing? But that's the thing. They weren't, there
Yeah.
was no, so that's when you knew.
Continuity was an issue.
I'm sorry?
Continuity was an
Yeah.
issue.
It became an issue in those last seasons.
Yeah.
But that's part of, part of the charm of the shows is that they do hold up. They do have a consistency to it. There is a story arc of sorts throughout the whole run. I mean, I've always said it's like, certain shows you see, oh, look, it's going to be on. And you, for me, it was Chips. I loved Chips, watched Chips religiously growing up.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
But when TNT picked it up a few years back and I sat down I was like, what was I thinking? This thing is awful. I can't
Yeah.
sit through this. But I could sit through a $6 Million Man episode. I could sit
Yeah.
obviously through a Star Trek Batman, Adam West, I could sit through an episode very easily. But yeah, Chips was a rough.
Before we get on to with the question, I also forgot $6 Million Man never got a proper ending final episode.
No.
Where Bionic Woman got, it was called On the Run with
Mhm.
Jamie
Right.
Hanley,
A nice
not
wrap
even one of
up.
the Beat Party OSI, and we consider it one of the finest episodes of the series, actually, the Bionic
Yes,
Woman
absolutely.
series.
Mhm.
And then if you go back now and you watch the DVDs or the shows, little Easter eggs, you'll see like a lot of the 70s shows, they didn't go back and change it because of broadcasting. You'll see like a ladder from like Bionic Woman episode where Steve and her are running bionically to jump over the fence. And if you look in the corner,
Yeah.
you see their shadow and you see the little part of the ladder that they were jumping
Yeah,
off.
they're jumping off.
You see the boom mic go across. Like you had said, a lot of, they wouldn't back then, they didn't edit it. Even for the DVDs, they didn't take it out. But it's kind of fun to watch those little things. But it's at a time period. But yeah, the final episode of Bionic Woman, she got a proper send off in terms of her character arc, which Steve never got. Just got an episode and it was gone. It was done.
Well, while you're thinking about the other one that I could ask, so you mentioned some of the guests that you've had on. So I just want to know, like, who are some of your favorites, and what are some of the stories that you learned from them, and some of your favorite stories from behind the scenes?
Well,
Yeah.
the majority of them were ones I did with my old host Paul K. Bisson on Cyborgs. My all-time favorite one, and just because I kind of shocked him a little bit myself, was Rick Lenz.
Yeah.
We had Rick Lenz, who was Jamie's savior, so to speak, on the Bionic Woman. He's the one who brought her back to life with these revolutionary cryogenic techniques to bring her around. And then in the process, she starts to fall in love with him because her memory of Steve is gone. So Steve's just watching this whole thing happening. And we had him on, and he's not really doing any acting these days. He writes. He's a fantastic writer.
Yes.
And at that time, he had just written one novel and one memoir. And his memoir was, about his life. Obviously, it's a memoir. But the way he'd written it was structured in a way that it was vignettes from different time periods. And it was just him recollecting, like, okay, here's something that happened maybe only a year ago. Here's something that happened when I first got into acting. Here's something that happened during Bionic Woman. But when you look at it, it just seems at first you think, oh my gosh, this is all over the place. But no, there was a flow through to the whole narrative. And I was very impressed with that. But one thing he kept talking about was how he drank a lot. He was like, but he never used a certain word. So but he would talk about, almost blackout events. So I finally said, I love the narrative. I love the way you wrote this. I get it, and I really appreciate you telling the story the way you did. But you seem to be skirting something here, and I'm going to ask. And when I asked, I could almost hear Paul going, because I said, were you an alcoholic? You don't address that in the book. And he was just quiet for a moment. I said, all right, that's it. He's going to hang up on us now.
Yeah.
He was like, I didn't think so at the time. I really thought I had it all. I mean, I didn't go into any sort of, rehab type thing. He was, and he was very honest about it. And he asked me at the end, like he said, what made you think of that? I said, well, it's just usually when people talk about excessive drinking, they get around to the point that I'm telling you all this because I was and am a recovering alcoholic. And he's like, no, he still actually enjoys a glass of wine every once in a while still too, but that was probably that one. Jim McMullen, who I became friends with on Facebook until his passing a few years back, was one of my favorites because just a very easygoing kind of person. And, he would every once in a while reach out and say, wish me happy birthday and things like that. And I remember even one time I got him because I saw online, he was talking about how he appeared in all these different TV shows, but he'd forgotten about them. And he actually appeared on the game show Video Village. And I found his appearance on YouTube. And he's looking at it at first and he goes, I think that's me. And I'm like, Jim, that's you. He says Jim McMullen. He introduces you as Jim McMullen, but he was so thrilled when he saw it. He goes, I don't even know what I did with the money I won on that game. So it's like, because, that was another thing too, for a lot of actors, I guess at the time, their agents would get them onto game shows. Lindsay did and Lee did. And
the dating game.
The dating game. Yeah. The dating game.
Yeah.
Oh, it was a huge thing because I believe Kirstie Alley did the same thing also. And I don't know, a number of other people that went on to great careers did that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Kirstie Alley did Password Plus, if I remember correctly, and Match Game.
One thing I want to ask also is, when I was a kid, I remember getting the $6 Million Man action figure. I could not have been more excited because it was like such a hot commodity. I don't have mine anymore, and I lost it, but because it had that bionic eye to look to, which from what I recall, didn't really do too much, but I still wish I still had mine now. Right there it is. So I lost mine years ago. What do you have? You're holding up right now. John's holding up the $6 Million Man action figure, which I still wish I had mine. But what other memorabilia do all of you have from the series?
I'll let you guys go because basically my answer is name it. I probably have it.
It does, yeah. I can tell you that I didn't have anything growing up. My parents, they just weren't into that kind of stuff, so had nothing until about 5 or 6 years ago when I started finding stuff on eBay. I do have a Bionic Woman action figure. But Jamie's wearing the original tracksuit that I have. I was able to get the lunchbox with the thermos of the Bionic Woman. I've got a Richard Anderson action figure in his suit with his herringbone jacket, and that has a lot of meaning now since he passed away a number of years ago. I got it while he was still alive, and I thought, wonder if I can get him to sign it somehow. How can I get to California? But that didn't happen, and he died. I did buy his autobiography book, his memoir book, which was nice to read. And I started buying scripts because I really liked the scripts. And so I bought a lot of, as many as I could sort of get my hands on at a reasonable price. And that is what I found was a big surprise between this, what aired and what the original scripts, depending on the version you have. And there's so many differences between what the script started off as being and what actually aired. And that was a lot of fun, just reading through all those scripts and finding out, what could have happened and what actually did happen. You never know why things changed, but I have a lot of the scripts and I really enjoy those. That's pretty much what I have.
Yeah, there's a ton of merchandise. I know John has it available to show, but there was the action figures. There was the Death Probe, which was the model after the Death Probe 1, but the color of the second Death Probe, and that's actually considered like the rarest collectible of the show because it was near the end of the show and they weren't producing much, so they produced a limited amount. You had the VHS tapes, you had the novels, you had actually the Bigfoot one was called The Secret of Bigfoot Pass. And they had back then VHS. They have laser discs of them. What else? Like Liz said, scripts. I've collected scripts and stuff like that. There's different ones. There's even scripts that weren't even produced that you can buy. Copies of, obviously. And I reached out to Kenny Johnson, and he actually emailed me a copy of his copy, the original script he wrote, which was kind of nice. He's pretty much like, don't share it with anybody, because this stuff's, you're not supposed to pass it around. And that, and there was everything. There's the Viewmasters. There's even more dolls that have been produced nowadays by Biff Bang Pow. And what's the other one, John, that made the smaller figures? I can't think of the name right now. Not Reaction.
Oh, Zika.
Zika Toys made a Bigfoot. And the thing is, that Bigfoot mold, the original Bigfoot mold from back then, and the small ones are modeled after just almost the Star Wars Chewbacca figure, the same mold. Almost. I'll let John take over because he's got stuff ready and handy to show.
Well, John, can you hold up that model again? Because sometimes when whoever's speaking, we won't get to see the video. So if you could just hold it up.
I was going to say the same thing.
Of this guy here?
Yes.
All right. So this is the Death Probe. Pretty good shape too. That this is probably this and Maskatron. No, actually no. Jamie Summers' house are the most the carriage house are the most expensive, difficult. I do not have a carriage house. I'm working on that. But I like Liz, as a kid, the most I had was the board game and the Viewmaster. I never had the action figures. My cousin had them. One of my best friends had them. It was so frustrating because he had the $6 Million Man action figures. He had all the sets and everything, but he also had Donnie and Marie and their studio set, for the Donnie and Marie show. And we'd go over to play, and he wanted to play Donnie and Marie. So I would drive him nuts because he would be doing things like he'd be, having Donnie and Marie dance and stuff. And then I'd sort of sneak over and grab his $6 Million Man figure, have him leap over the set as one of the spotlights was about to crash on Marie, and he'd bat it away. And then he's freaking out going, "We're not playing that." And I'm like, why not?
I will say, to no one's surprise watching, I did have the Donny Osmond figure.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
yeah. If you guys want to see the laser discs here, I can show. I got there actually were Disco Vision, which was the early, before they were laser discs.
Disco Vision.
Which is the pilot there. And then they obviously came out, which is the rarest of the three, is the Bionic Woman one.
Oh, look at that.
Jeez.
And the picture quality obviously is good for the time. And then another one that's highly sought after is The Secret of Bigfoot, which is a thicker multi-laser disc one here.
Oh, fantastic.
One episode?
It's both part 1 and part 2.
That big disc, you only have 2 shows?
Two shows.
Yeah, it only has the 2 that's out on it, just the 2 Secret of Bigfoot, and the other ones are just on 1 disc.
Okay.
Fit like 45 minutes per side.
Right.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, and then you have more of the modern releases, which in 2010, the Time Life came out with the box set, and that helped reintroduce a lot of people like our age back to the show because it's sold out, and then the rights moved to Universal to make the individual seasons then.
Wow. So they go on to make the reunion movies later on, years after both series were canceled. What kind of stories can you share with us from the making of those films?
Well, that whole thing was interesting because, as far as Lee was concerned, he was done with 6 Mil, and he was just finishing up Fall Guy. He'd done 5 years of the Fall Guy, which was immensely popular, and he actually was the one who said, "We're done. Like we're not continuing this." And everybody agreed, go out on a high, because it was a top 20 show even in his 5th season. He just knew a lot of Hollywood types and have them on and such. So he's on vacation. I think it was Italy, Richard Anderson says. In fact, actually, I don't know why I blanked on that. Probably one of the best interviews we ever did. We did get Richard Anderson on so shortly before he passed away, and I still have my phone messages from him because it was like the biggest thrill of my life when he's like calling up to confirm everything, and I couldn't pick up the phone because I was in school teaching, so I go and check my voicemail afterwards, and it's like, "Hey pal, Richard Anderson here." I'm just like, he just called me pal. So yeah, he was a fantastic guest, but you could tell, the age, the voice was getting softer, and we had to do a little technical jiggery pokery to get him so that he sounded clear. when we were releasing the episode. But oh, the reunion movie. So anyway, he and Lee are in Italy. They're best of friends still, despite everything. They're off doing their own. A lot of times you see people who talk about, we were great on set, but I haven't seen you in years. Richard and Lee maintained their friendship long after 6 Mil was over, and they're on vacation together with their wives. And at one point, Richard just sort of like falls into it and goes, "Hey pal, I got one more mission for you." And Lee's like, "I told you, I'm not doing this anymore. I just want to be left alone, And he's kind of, I guess he's kind of also answering like Lee, but he's also, doing, and Richard's like going, "Yeah, but one more for your country. You got to do this one more." And so Lee's like, "All right, what are you talking about?" And he's like, "I want to go to the networks and I want to pitch them, a reunion movie with you and Lindsay." And then the idea was, okay, we'll do it, but only if you use it as a vehicle to introduce a new bionic like it was the network's idea to do the Bionic Operative. He was just all set to just do a reunion movie, because reunion movies, everybody was doing them. I Dream of Jeannie had theirs, Man from Uncle. Everybody was getting back together on network television and doing, I think there was even a Beverly Hillbillies movie. But this was like, fine, we'll do it, but we want to continue the franchise. We want a new Bionic show. It's the 80s. This could be really cool. A lot of action. Miami Vice is coming out, music, the whole thing. So Richard agrees. And initially they were talking about Lee Majors II, his son, as the operative. But that didn't work out. He didn't cut it. And that's when they bring in the brilliant Tom Shandley, who played, what was it? What was the son's name? It wasn't Steve Austin. It was, I'm blanking on the son. Michael Austin. Thank you. Michael Austin. Who ironically, during a test flight of a plane during his
graduation or something,
graduation exercises, right? He crashes the plane and has the same crippling injuries as Steve does, and Steve has to
imaginative,
has to go beg for it, saying, "I'll give you another operative." So there you go. We got the hook. You get another operative. Just do this, and of course, Oscar agrees, and we go through the whole thing. But the movie doesn't catch on. It did well ratings wise, and they repeated it the year after. It still did well, but not well enough to sell as a series. But Richard's still determined now that it's like, oh, we could do a series. Series means I can come back as Oscar Goldman. So, hey, NBC, let's do it again, but let's do it from the Bionic Woman side. I'll give you a Bionic Girl. This is the one at that time, nobody realized it, but there's
Sandra Bullock.
Sandra
Bullock.
First
role.
Playing Kate Mason, who, and this time though, instead of trying to mimic as an accident, she's a paraplegic, and the bionics are not limbs attached to her, but it's rather she's literally rewired and supercharged so that she's able to get up and walk and then start running and then start jumping and the whole thing. And she's got a lot more attachments and stuff. Her vision is much better, her hearing. So, and again, great little movie. And during that time, Lee and Lindsay, Steve and Jamie propose. Okay, end of the movie. We don't have a Bionic Girl show, but we do have the two of them now engaged. So now the final third, this is it. We're going to end it. We didn't plan it this way, but it's a nice trilogy. The movie moves over to CBS, and it's the wedding of Steve and Jamie. But of course, there's one last mission from Oscar before they go and say their ideas. Plus, someone is trying to break down Jamie's bionics, and she, we get her back in bed again, shades of the Bionic Woman, lying in bed. And, oh my God, I'm falling apart and all this stuff.
But, the one thing about that particular incident of her losing her bionics is that it was different than the previous times where she was just rejecting possibly her bionics or she had a serious injury. This was something that people could relate to because it was a computer virus that was, planted in her And so that was something that we hadn't seen before, but as that was in 1994, I think it was that
Yep.
show was on.
Yep.
People had home computers at that point, and we could understand the damage that a virus could do. So I thought it was very, timely to have that particular breakdown happen, because, what else could happen with their bionics that could be, related to viruses and things like that. And maybe they get software updates. Who knows? But I thought that was different. That was kind of fun to see something else a little bit different.
Yeah, and they kind of had the 80s, especially the first two, the whole 80s techie. The music wasn't they didn't use any of the intros from the TV show, none of the bionic
Terrible
effects.
music.
And they obviously, because it's the 80s, they had to ramp up the bionics. Michael's can run like 90 miles an hour, like a blur when they run.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
And I think the three of us agreed we enjoyed the second movie the most, because you could see Sandra Bullock was a star happening. Even Lindsay said she knew she was going on to bigger things, and she would have been great if she would have continued to show with her character. We thought she was outstanding, and like I said, each one was topical. And you had, like I said, by the computer virus and the computers in the last one. I think the director, Steve D'Souza, was that the director, John? I think. Was that he was
the third one?
Yeah, he was Lee's. I think he was
one.
Lee's assistant back in the day, I believe, and he ended up being the director on the final movie, working with him.
Yeah.
Yeah. The movie missed, that last movie missed, was the opportunity for past, guests.
Characters.
We only had Rudy and Oscar from the show. We didn't get Callahan. We didn't get Russ. We didn't get, anybody that might be like, you'd sit there and go, oh, even if it was just sitting in the audience at the wedding, it's like, who are all these?
Yeah, like you're the parents or something. They were anchors for the show. They were, recurring characters that really made the show just well-rounded, because it wasn't just two isolated, stars. It was, sort of their circle of, friends or family or coworkers that, ended up being important to the audience. And they just really missed the mark on that as well. Yeah.
They
should have been back in Ojai getting married, not in some plantation somewhere. To me, they also missed that, just circling back to, the beginning of the shows where they were back in Ojai, and, just some familiarity to the original series was lost in those 3 episodes, which I missed. I wish they had done a little bit more.
Does anyone know whatever happened to Sandra Bullock? Did she go on to other things? Or
never heard of her, but it was funny that they didn't bring back. They had a bionic dog, Max. They didn't bring. Obviously, that was one we didn't care for. And then they had the bionic boy, which I'm not going to tell you much about him, but there was an episode with the bionic boy where Vince Van Patten plays the boy. Is a famous episode, and and he gets bionics for his limbs similar.
You could see the influence that the show had on other things, everywhere I read it, but it's clear. It's like RoboCop, and even even the Inspector Gadget stuff later on. So what do you think the legacy of this show is in the sci-fi genre?
In terms of doing stories that are sci-fi and technology driven, they're certainly the grandparents of it all. I mean, even Schwarzenegger goes up to Lee Majors at one point in some event, and he, pokes him in the chest and goes, "You are the original Terminator." So it's like it's like you're it. But the thing is that, and I think actually, I know it's going to sound weird, RoboCop comes probably the closest to, despite all its violence, is also still recognizing the humanity of the fact, yes, these are machines. And this was like the whole thing with Steve in the first couple of seasons, where he was bitter and angry at times, especially when people would look at him like an oddity, like, oh, that's so cool. And he's like, yeah, that really cool. This isn't really my arm. If you want to know it's cool. I mean, he comes to grips with it. Jamie, not so much. I mean, Jamie, there
struggled the whole series all the way through, even the reunion movies, with being bionic and being human. She seemed to find it more challenging. She didn't embrace the technology as much as Steve did, where he said, "Oh, let's upgrade this and let me get an eye or a blue." She was like, "Yeah, I'm stuck with this, but I'll make the best of it." But never really thought it was that cool.
But that's like, I would say that, especially now when we're getting into the AI age here, where everything, artificial intelligence and stuff, is to remember our humanity in it all and don't get lost in it all the way.
Right. That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah, and I think culturally, if you think about it, a lot of the people that work in prosthetics or doctors schools have said they remember watching that show and that kind of inspired them to want to go into that field or make prosthetics for people in the army and for people with limbs. And even at the time, $6 Million Man was like the only show of its kind. Back then, you had a lot of police dramas. You had multiple shows where there's nothing else other than maybe the Quest Tower tapes, which was a TV movie, I believe, from 72, something like that, 73. But there's nothing else like it. And then the people that watch, like us, that grew up, then went into the fields, the medical fields, were inspired to come up with the idea of prosthetics and limbs, electronically controlled limbs, to help people that lost limbs or in war lost limbs because of war in the medical field.
I would certainly imagine so. Well, did any of you watch the Bionic Woman remake several years ago?
2007.
yes.
Yeah.
Yes,
That was
we did.
terrible.
Yes, we did.
Oh, okay. That was what were your thoughts about it? So
I called it a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
David Ike was very confident in himself that he was going to reinvent this one the way they had with him and Ron Moore doing Battlestar Galactica. And it was like, you're missing the point of Bionic Woman the way you present here and such. And then I even came up, like, in my own head, because I felt the need, I kind of like came up with, well, what if we could still salvage this and say Lindsay Wagner shows up and says, I'm the real Jamie Summers, but I'm going to help you find your way. And we sort of like, but it was too late. It was all too late. The final episode or two weren't terrible. She certainly warmed up a lot more, but yeah, it was so dark and just so, and again, that's what I come back to with 6 Mil and Bionic Woman. They can have their dark moments. They can have there's this episode where Jamie's in, a padded cell and she's screaming.
Yeah, that was a good one.
Trying to figure out who she is and such, but and she still succeeds and she wins and she comes out on top and there's hope. And I think that's the biggest thing, again, also the legacy.
Where the humanity,
the hope of it all.
Well, I read Lindsay Wagner hated it.
She did. She definitely did.
It was bad. Yeah. I don't even think I watched all the episodes. I can't even remember. I just thought from the very first episode it was awful, and I thought, oh, can I really do this again? I hardly remember it at all. It was so bad.
Have you gone through each episode by now of the both series? You've gone through each one of the podcasts already?
Yes.
So what comes next for the podcast?
Well, like I said, we had taken some time off. We started to do something last year. We actually did, because basically we're doing it. We want to plan to do it once a month and sort of have it thematic. So we did one episode of that afterwards where it was talking about what a proposed $6 Million Man series today would look like. What would you want to see in it? Because again, and it all comes back to that whole thing of the humanity. It's very easy to slap on special effects and have just some good looking guy and a lot of action. But if you don't have the humanity level to it, it's not the $6 Million Man anymore. And I think that's part of the reason why they're struggling to get a movie out there. Because it's just, how do you do it so that you respect the source material, which is what the Bionic Woman 2007 didn't do. And at the same time, yes, we all know it's 2023, 2024. We got to be realistic. It's not going to be, our characters singing "Gotta Get Loose" like Lee did back in the day.
Oh yeah,
that's not going to happen. So, but you got to find that balance. Because again, this isn't going to be about us, the old time fans. I see this with a lot of Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who. There's a lot of longtime fans who are disappointed with current output, and it's like, well, it's really not for you. It's for new people and with any luck, they hook into it, and then they watch the old stuff too, and say, "Hey, that was pretty cool too."
Well,
but it's got to be recognizable.
Yeah, oh, for sure. But have you heard of any talk of any other iterations of either series?
Not Bionic Woman. There's still this lingering thing going on. Any day now. Mark Wahlberg.
$6 billion man.
That's the $6 billion man, Mark Wahlberg.
Yep.
So, Yeah.
But he's gonna be a grandfather before that episode, like before
that's-
anything happens. He's
that's
too
the thing.
old.
Yeah.
I think I read about the Mark Wahlberg thing years ago. That's the
Yeah.
thing. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. He issued a statement a few weeks ago saying, "Oh no,
Still
it's
talking about
still
it.
out there, still talking about it." It's like, okay, keep talking, pal. Let's, you know. I just, I just don't know if it's really a property that needs a movie. I think
Mm.
give it a TV show, give it a streaming home, give it 8 episodes a season, and really do some tight, you know, stories that deal with the human side of being a cyborg and have the adventure and everything, and it would be good. But and that's what we kind of that's what we kind of covered on our last episode. In terms of what we're thinking about upcoming, we want to actually do a full-length review of the novelization.
Oh,
That's something we're talking about. We're thinking about, because Liz says she's, you know, gotten hold of scripts and such. She has some scripts that were not produced, and we
Yeah.
were thinking of actually
That'd be
doing
fun.
table readings.
Oh, that'd be
Mhm,
cool.
mhm.
You know,
Yeah.
Well, you have to know this question was going to be coming. What's your favorite episode in each one of you? But so John, start with you.
okay, that's the thing. That's almost like asking you who's your favorite child, because there are just so many, and I don't like leaning into the whole thing of saying, well, you know, Bigfoot or um uh, Death Probe or anything, because those are iconic classic episodes. I love
Too
them and
easy?
all, but yeah, too easy, too easy. Favorite episodes. There's actually, and this is ironic, I'd say one of my favorites. There's a 5th season $6 Million Man episode called Just a Matter of Time, in which Steve thinks he's gone through a time warp, and it's something like 6 or 8 years later.
That
Yeah.
was good.
That was
Yeah.
a really good
I
story.
like that one.
And it was just a setup for him to learn this formula he had and such, by the bad guys. But like for a while there, you didn't know. I mean, because they were doing all sorts of crazy things anyway. So it's like maybe he did go into a time warp. For
You know what I liked about that though as well is that I felt that Steve's character was kind of getting dumbed down a bit as the series went on. He wasn't. That episode showed just how smart that man is supposed to be.
Yep.
He picked up these subtle things about the sun, the stars, whatever, and he was able to figure out because he's a smart man, not because someone told him or he stumbled across someone saying something. He figured it out himself, and that kind of redeemed the series for me at that point, because I was starting to feel that Steve just seemed to act. He just didn't seem to be as brilliant as he used to be. I like that one for that reason.
Yep. And then
So,
Bionic
Harry, what
Woman.
about you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Did you want Bionic Woman too?
Sure.
Or did you just?
Yes,
I was
yes.
going to say, because Bionic Woman, again, that's another one of those. But I would say from the first season, it's not everybody's favorite, but I happen to just love it. Is Jamie's mother. I love the whole thing of, you know, Jamie discovering her mom was a secret agent too. It's very comic bookish, but Lindsay does such a great performance with it. And Martha's not only Martha Scott in it, but what is her name? Playing Jamie's mother,
Yes.
Barbara.
In real life?
In real
No,
life.
in the show, Barbara. Yeah, I think her name was Barbara.
No, the real life.
Oh, real life.
Yeah, I can't recall her last name. Was Barbara was
I
her
can't
first
either.
name.
All right, you guys discuss. I'm gonna look it up, because that's gonna kill me. Because I got to meet that woman at an event out in California like 5 years ago, and it was the best 30 seconds of my life, because the woman's like in her 90s now, and
Barbara.
I don't know what happened, but like I went up to her and she took my hand, and she's staring at me. Next thing you know, they're pulling her away like, you got to go. But like for that
Barbara
moment
Rush.
there, I felt Barbara Rush. I felt like, oh my
Rush, that's
God,
it.
this woman is amazing. You know,
And
such a
Jerry, what about you? Your two favorites.
That's always that's a tough one for, like me, the one as a kid, I have the most memories, and most people do when you say $6 Million Man that haven't watched the show since you're is the Bigfoot, the Secret of Bigfoot episodes. In terms, it was bonkers. It was way out there. You had Andre the Giant in the costume, and then the follow-up episodes, the reappearance that they had Ted Cassidy, because Andre became too famous to afford him. For me, it's in terms of the awesomeness, that's awesome. But in terms of all-around great episode and the acting from all points of production, the writing was really hitting its stride. Was the Bionic Woman two-parter. that, Kenny Johnson's script was so great. The Dick Motor, the directing was excellent. The acting by Lindsay, obviously outstanding, and introduced a character to the mythology that didn't detract from Steve at all. And I consider the best of that series. There's other great ones and stuff like that. The Rescue for Athena 1 are really good. And then for the Bionic Woman, my favorite is Sister Jamie, where she plays a nun, and she goes on a convent, and it's the only episode where she's kind of like narrating through the whole thing. Well, we do this, and working with the nuns, and it's just from all around. It had a little bit of comedy to it. It had action, and just the fact that she was narrating, and it flowed really well. And there were some other ones like Biofeedback was really good, and I think the final episode on Run was outstanding. But yeah, Sister Jamie for me.
And Liz?
For $6 Million Man, I like Deadly Replay, and I don't think anyone else really cares about that episode. It's because I found that I thought that episode was good because we got to find out more about his accident, at least the way it was portrayed in the series, because it was Steve getting an opportunity, or reluctantly, to fly the same plane that he crashed in, and to find out kind of what they led us to believe that it was. That someone had tried to kill him, that they had, done something to the capsule, the plane that he was flying, and that's why it crashed. So it was him sort of reconciling what happened to him, years ago during that crash. And I liked that episode. It was one of my favorites of the series. For Bionic Woman, well, of course, I had to say that instead, because of course Bionic Woman Part 1 and 2 would have been my favorite, but that's really what everybody would say. So if you take that out of the mix, it would be Deadly Replay. For Bionic Woman series, I also really liked Jamie's mother as well. But I also think Kill Oscar episode 1 and 2 were my favorites of the series, and On the Run. So there's like 4, but I think Kill Oscar, because there was a crossover with Steve Austin, and we like crossover episodes. So I would say, if I had to pick that, I would say it would be the Kill Oscar Part 1 and 2.
Oh yeah, and you can't even forget honorable mentions. We'll say for 6 mil was John's favorite episode, Day of the Robot with John Saxon. It's a joke we joke.
The robot.
Day of the Robot
That
with
one.
John Saxon as another robot. Then you also got Mirror Image from Bionic Woman, where you have a double.
Yeah.
Lindsay plays both parts, and the woman takes her place in that, and she obviously can't fake the bionics, obviously. And then she comes back when Lisa Galloway, Lindsay plays, which is like the villain of the episode, the person impersonating her. She comes back in later, when she breaks out of jail, you find out she takes this adrenaline, which is like a chewing gum that gives her temporary bionic strength. So that's and a Mirror Image is really good. Yeah, that's another one for Bionic Woman.
Well, Jerry, you mentioned Andre the Giant. Are there any behind the scenes anecdotes about his appearance on $6 Million Man?
Oh yeah, he was a beer drinker, and he was so huge. He was like 7'5", 500 pounds. He would literally, he'd be sitting back, waiting between scenes, and he'd literally be eating like a whole chicken and like 6 cans of beers, and the cans were the size of his hands. He'd drink it and crush it and throw it away. And the joke was, the directors would say, "We never seen him go to the bathroom. How did he go?" And then the joke was, Ted would say, "Boy, this Ted Cassidy, who took over for, and continuing appearances, would say, well, his costume smelled really funny on the inside." So they had to pack in Ted with pillows and stuff, because he was like 6'9" and he wasn't 500 pounds. So they had to fill the costume for him a little more, where Andre was full. Andre was the costume, his hair and stuff. He didn't wear, Ted had to wear a wig and stuff. But yeah, they wondered, where did Andre go to the bathroom? That was
Lindsay said that when she had to stand next to, the Bigfoot character, and when they returned, for season 3, she said it smelled so bad. She said the smell, when she had to hug him, she goes, "Oh, it was just bad."
Oh, eesh.
Yeah.
But it's funny because Lee, like we said, did about 70% of his own stunts. And so when they did the fight scene between him and Bigfoot with Andre the Giant in The Secret of Bigfoot, Lee does most of the stunts. And he said it was the one time I thought to myself, maybe I'll just let Vince do it all, because, at one point, Bigfoot kind of just jumps on top of him. And he's like looking at him and he's like, all right, go easy, big guy. And Andre's like, don't worry, I got this. Because it's like he's Andre the Giant. He's a wrestler. Newsflash, it's kind of faked, So,
Yeah.
there's Andre doing the jump onto him, and Lee goes, I was so impressed. He lands on top of me. I didn't feel a thing. He was able to bring his body down in such a way, nothing hit against me.
Yeah.
And still it looked like he crushed me.
Yeah, if you watch the episode, things to watch out for. You literally, when Steve comes across them, because it's done really dramatically. You got Steve running through the woods bionically, and then you slowly see these feet moving, making loud noises, and it goes back for the cuts. And then when he first sees them, Andre's got a smile on his face. He's like, "Yeah, I can tangle with something here." He gives almost like a grin that we later find out. He's a bionic, so he's strong. And so he tangles with them. And then if you watch the scene when later on in the fight, Bigfoot rips up a tree and he goes to throw it at Steve, and it's Lee and does the stunt with him. He ducks. It's all done in slow motion, real dramatic. Then he charges Steve, and Lee gives him like a waist flip, and it's really well done. It's one of the best actual action segments of both series. It's just so well shot, that little scene.
Yeah. Now I know. So, John, is it all of you involved in the Doctor Who podcast now?
No, that's me. But Jerry has appeared in a couple of episodes. That's me and a writer friend of mine by the name of Jim Beard.
Are you doing it episode by episode there? Because there's so many iterations of that one.
Oh yeah, no, we're doing it episode by episode. It's just audio. It's weekly. It's primarily through Jim's eyes because Jim had never watched the show before. So I was like, well, I could be the old school guy who can tell you things I know about the show, but and the biggest thing is not to get too enthusiastic because Jim doesn't want spoilers. And I'm like, dude, it's 2023. Have you been on the internet?
Yeah.
That'll take you years to go through each one.
Oh
yes.
Gosh, I can't imagine. Good grief.
Oh yeah.
Well, what about any other show? If you could choose any other show to do a podcast on, what would it be? I'm sorry, go ahead.
John, you go.
I kind of have this thing for Sequest DSV, which was a 90s show about a submarine. In fact, I'm actually going through because I just got the Blu-rays recently and I've been going through the second season and such. I've got this thing that I would love to do that. Or everybody always keeps telling me I should do an Incredible Hulk podcast.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
that would be another investment.
Kenny Johnson.
That's a five. Yeah, but Kenny Johnson, 5 years though.
That's a big commitment.
Yeah. I said the same thing. I told John, you do an Incredible Hulk, and I think Todd Wiederman, a friend of ours, is part of the show. Sometimes we would jump on that. It would be nice to see. I think I'd really like to do an Incredible Hulk one. Yeah.
Well, how can people find the podcast, and also how can they follow all of you on social media?
Jerry, go ahead. I'll let you go first.
Okay. Like I said, I'm a government employee by day. I'll just use the spiel I always use on all podcasts. An artist, illustrator by night. You can reach out to me at www.geraldlang.com. That's my website. I have my illustration work. And then I have my own self-published comic here called the first volume I just launched with 3 covers, 4 trading cards, 2 action figures, prints, and a website at www.theshokai.com. It's a Japanese modern fantasy story here, and here's the cover, one of the covers I did.
Nice.
Yeah,
That's really nice, Jerry.
The illustrations that are absolutely beautiful, really beautiful.
They are.
Oh, thank you. And I came out with 3 different action figures to go with, which I created.
Look at that. Nice, Jerry.
And I try to have the stuff within my reach here. I have the 4 trading cards you can see on the website, prints. Then I have a newsletter at Substack. It's a free email newsletter. The books are coming out once a year. I have 4 stories written out. And then the newsletter I use to fill in at Gerald Lange or at Mystical Icon Studios at Substack. And I use that to fill in between the time, which is going to have a Sunday newspaper style strip of another character that's part of the overarching storyline. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram at Gerald Lange. I just post art on there. But you can reach out to me at my main websites there.
Well, I can't follow that. I'm just on Facebook.
That's it.
Yeah, that's it.
And how about, and John, you?
I pretty much, yeah, I used to have a lot more of a presence. I mean, the only presence now I have is in terms of personal is Facebook. But in terms of the shows, yeah, I mean, you can find OSI Files, you can find the entire run of our video series on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. We also have well, I guess they call it X now. So it's OSI_files and Instagram as well. You can go to Facebook. You can find pretty much all my podcasts there, whether it's, my Batcave podcast where we were doing the 60s Batman TV series, Shazam ISIS podcast, World's Greatest Super Friends podcast, or the current podcast that I'm doing, The Doctor's Beard, which is Doctor Who with me and Jim Beard. So it's a little play on the joke.
Yeah, you definitely want to check out the one I really like, John, that him and Richard Lee did, the Shazam ISIS, which was they reviewed the episodes of that 70s filmation, live action shows, Shazam and the Secrets of ISIS.
Yeah.
The live action. Yeah.
Well, we want to thank all of you for joining us today. It was so much fun to get to hear all the stories. And please go check out the OSI podcast as well. It's a lot of fun. Like I said, Ike and I were both big fans of both series. So get to hearing all your stories today and all the insider and information that you've accumulated through the years was a great treat for us. So again, thank you for joining us.
Hey, no problem. Thank you.
Great fun. Thank
having
you.
us on.
Well,
Yeah.
This has been Pop Culture Retro. I'm Jonathan Rosen, along with Ike Eisenmann. And again, a very special thanks to John Drew, Elizabeth Goddard, and Jerry Lange. And please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Pop Culture Retro, where no one was hurt during the making of this podcast.